Good afternoon or good morning in Texas, and welcome to the latest edition of Lunchtime Learnings. I'm absolutely delighted and honoured to be joined today by Jeff West. Jeff has been in sales for 30 years. I want to be polite, but
That
and
means
as
I'm
coach
old.
experienced, and as coach and led sales team in multiple industries, and was among the top sales performers and leaders in the nation. You've written, I know, a couple of great books that I'd like to discuss with you today. So the latest one was Said the Lady with a Blue Hair. So 7 Rules for Success in Direct Sales. And also an award-winning author of The Unexpected Tour Guide. And I know you're working with plenty of other people, all top secret, so I can't even ask you to write some more stories, which is exceptionally exciting. So thank you so much for joining me from Texas this morning. I think it's about 8 o'clock in the morning your time. So thank you. Thank you for getting out of bed so early, I'm sure, yeah.
My
Which is
pleasure.
different.
Thank you so much for asking me to be here.
So just wanted to, first of all, maybe share your journey, if you'd be kind enough to do that. And then obviously you've come across loads of exceptional salespeople out there. And I just wanted to know from you what you feel is the common denominator with the top performers, please.
Sure, be glad to. Thank you for the question. My personal story, I actually originally planned to be a teacher. I have a bachelor's degree in music education and a master's in music composition. And I laugh and tell everyone that those 2 degrees and a $6 in my pocket will get me a cup of coffee at Starbucks now. So it worked out real well. But I ended up going into sales. I always say by default or by accident, but truthfully, I think it was divine intervention in my part. I had gotten married and my wife needed to finish up her degree. So I needed to work while she did that. There weren't any teaching jobs around that area. So I got a job in sales. In the first year, I made 50% more than I would have made teaching. And so I just stayed in that area. I couldn't justify the pay cut. We began to have a family, and my wife and my children picked up this nasty habit. They wanted to eat and live indoors and have electricity. What's that all about? So I stayed in sales. I did 4 years, I think it was, in the musical instrument industry. And I did well there. Got promoted to the second year, got promoted to be the general manager of their operation in the state of Georgia. And then I was in the industrial uniform industry for, I think it was 7 years. So close to that. I'd have to go back and look at the calendar. And in that trek, I started off in sales and began to, within about 2 years, I was the number 1 salesman in the nation with that company. And then everybody started performing higher, because once you break a record, then everybody starts to realize, hey, this can be done. And so it helped a lot there. But the final career that I had in sales was in the insurance industry in the States. There's a major insurance brand, Fortune 500 company in the States called Aflac, and I started with them. And with Aflac, I was not an employee. I was actually an independent contractor. And so it was a commission-only position. First time I'd ever done that without a safety net. And so it was really out of my comfort zone. But I went after that. I did well within, I guess I'd been doing that about 7 years, 6 or 7 years. No, I take it back. It was 8 now, 8 years. And a mentor gave me 2 books. You'll appreciate this because of one of your previous guests. A mentor gave me 2 books in January of 2000. The first was John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And the second one was Bob Berg's book called Endless Referrals. Excuse me. And those 2 books literally changed the direction of my life. I didn't just read the books. I read the books. I dug in there and I made some choices about how to make it work in my industry. And then I put it to practice. Doing that changed my life. At that point, I had been a district sales manager with Aflac for 8 years, and I would hit my numbers 1 year, miss them 1 year. But that year, we took off. And it was a first year. I had the first year for $1 million district, and that was a big deal because Aflac policies are very inexpensive. And then we had a 30% increase after that. Then I became a regional sales coordinator, and I did that for 2 years. And then the last 10 years of my career, I was a state manager in the Houston, Texas, Gulf Coast area of Texas. And in most states in the United States with Aflac, the title state sales coordinator made sense because there was one in the state. Texas is kind of big, and so we had 8. But I was one of the 8, and did that for 10 years. When I decided it was time to retire from that industry, our mutual friend and acquaintance, Bob Berg, had become a friend of mine over the years. And I got his opinion about some things I had just written, The Unexpected Tour Guide, but I had not sent it out to anyone yet. And I sent it to him, and his compliments and comments were extremely encouraging, which is the kind of person he is. And I'm glad you had him on your show. Your audience should follow everything he does. Then I began speaking and writing, and I've written multiple books. The 2 that I'm the most proud of is The Unexpected Tour Guide, and then the newest one, Said the Lady with the Blue Hair. We'll talk more about those later if you'd like. But they were both award-winning books, got a lot of big-time recognition, even hit the bestseller list on Said the Lady with the Blue Hair. So now I teach people concepts, I write books. I'm in a happy place in my life is the best way to say it.
Fantastic, brilliant. And I think you covered everything I wanted to cover there by breaking it down. So you talked about coming out your comfort zone. You talked about having a mentor. You talked about actually getting to become a number 1 salesman. So I'm just going to piggyback on all those things and just start with, I wanted to know what it takes to be a top performer, but actually you were a top performer and you rose to become number 1 salesperson. So how did you do that, and what are the qualities that you thought worked well for you to get to where you became?
What a great question. In my case, becoming a top salesperson in the industrial uniform industry was almost I don't know, it was a combination of things. I had been given some great books on sales, and so I knew how sales was supposed to work. I knew how the numbers would work. I was understanding a bit about the psychology of sales, so I had studied. And so when I was in the industrial uniform arena, I actually worked with a company, and for that company, the way their compensation program was set up was you made a higher commission percentage if your sales were higher. And they didn't have anybody who thought they could do it. It wasn't a great sales team at that point. And I said, guys, it's a numbers game. Let's go to work and do what we need to do. And then the next thing you know, I was carrying a bigger average than what they thought they could do. And then all of a sudden they said, well, heck, if you can do it, I can do it. And we all started doing that. And then it got so big. The last quarter that I was in sales with them, they were flying me and another guy around the nation to go sell in other places because it was a very high investment industry. When you made a sale, it cost the company a lot of money to get it set up, but then they would get their money back. And they said, your branch can't afford it anymore. We're sending you everywhere. But the biggest thing for me was being able to get myself into the mentality that I knew how many calls it would take. And it didn't matter if I enjoyed making the calls. It didn't matter if my stomach was in knots when I walked in the door. All of the things that we all deal with at times in sales, none of that mattered. It was a matter of making the activity happen. And I wasn't committed to being number 1 in the nation. I was committed to making my activity happen. And then as my skill set grew, which it will if you do enough activity and you're learning, then I began to understand how people think. Because quite frankly, the biggest thing when you walk in the door or you make a first initial contact with a potential prospect, the biggest thing they're looking for has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. When I'm coaching groups now and about sales leadership and their sales process, I tell them, I'll ask them all, and it's a loaded question, and I apologize after I do it, but I ask them all the same question. And it's, what do you think a value proposition is? And they'll tell me what their company says their value proposition is. Well, we do this, we do that, we do this, we do that. And when they're through, I say, none of that's your value proposition. And they all look at me like they've got a deer in the headlight look. But I tell them, your value proposition has nothing to do with you. The reason people buy your goods or services has everything to do with how it makes their life better. And it has absolutely nothing to do with you, nothing to do with how great your company is. And I'm sure you and your company are wonderful, but it has everything to do with how their life improves when you do that. It's basically, it's not the value proposition is not yours, it's theirs. It's their value from your proposition. And that's where to focus. And somehow I learned that instinctually. I didn't verbalize it in such a way until after I had experience and time and research in there, but that's exactly what happens. It's when you focus on their value from your proposition and you're a nice person and you set some things in motion. I call it fusion points with how I do it. But when you set some things in motion, they want to take the next step with you. They like you, and they begin to know you, like you, and trust you. And that's what you're looking for.
Okay. So coming back there, couple of things. Mindset. So you've obviously got, and the top performers have got this growth mindset rather than this fixed mindset. So again, how do you get that growth mindset? Is it something you're born with? Is it something that you can learn, or is it, or you just you just like it, you just have it? I mean, I think Carol Dweck wrote a great book. I don't know if you've read it, about growth mindset, which is exceptional. But I see far too many people have got this fixed mindset, and they won't let go of it.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. And I know you were telling me your primary audience is real estate, and it doesn't matter what the industry is. You have to have an abundance mindset. And I don't necessarily think that's something you're born with, because I don't think it would have applied to me. I didn't have that early on. An abundance mindset, basically meaning that everything out there can make your business grow. There are prospects out there, and as the economy changes, goes up or down, if you're doing the right things and building your business the right way, you'll offset that. But as far as whether it's an innate thing with me or a learned skill, it was, in my case, it was a definite learned skill. I didn't have that abundance mindset. I grew up in a lifestyle that would be best described as very non-affluent. I tell people, I wasn't poor. My mother was poor. She just took me with her everywhere. But it's something I had to learn. And so how I learned it, I got around other people who had that abundance mindset. And that alone was a huge part of it. Charlie Tremendous Jones says, you're going to be the same person 5 years from now that you are today, with the exception of the books you read, the recordings you hear, and the people with whom you associate. And so by associating with people that had that abundance mindset, then it gave me the opportunity to absorb what they were saying, how they were looking at life, how they were doing different things. And so that was a huge thing for me. Plus, I read a lot of books that helped me gain things. And when I read a book, there are times when I read a book strictly for the pleasure of doing it. But there are times where I read a book because I'm trying to get every little morsel out of it to apply whatever I'm doing at the time. And so that I guess those two things are the best answer for your question that I think of. But I think just like in most things in life, I think just about everything is a skill. People skills, mindset, anything that you're doing in your business, it's almost always a skill, and all skills can be taught and can be learned if someone wants to.
You talked about the two books, over 21 Laws of Leadership, and you talked about the referral book from Bob. Mm-hmm. But what is interesting is you took action and you implemented it. And one of the things that I see far too much, if people will read a book, and this comes back to, are you a self-developer or a shelf developer? So, the self-developers will want to take action and implement it. The shelf developers, it just goes back on the bookshelf, covers dust, and never gets seen again.
Right.
So what, again, how can people watching this, listening to this, how do they take action? How do they implement it? And I mean, you talked about something previously about getting out of your comfort zone. How do you get out of your comfort zone? Because it's very easy to just keep on stay in that same lane. Don't change the lane.
That's a great question, and your point's right on the money. When someone's trying to get out of their comfort zone, what they're really trying to do is do something that overcomes that uneasiness they'll have inside themselves when they start doing something that they haven't done before. Or maybe they start doing something that is somehow triggering some emotional responses. You know, the way our neurology is set up in our body, everything we do is every decision we make, everything about that's kind of a combination of logic and emotion. In the emotional equation, what happens inside us is everything that we do, it seems like, will generate some sort of an emotional context in our brain, but then it starts manifesting itself inside our body. And when it does that, it's one of those things that if we like the way it feels, we keep going. It's very easy to get someone out of their normal pattern if you're having them do something that creates a positive emotional response in them, because that emotional neurology that goes on, it creates a somatic marker inside our body, and we link that feeling, that physiological feeling, to what's going on at the time. So if we're asking someone, okay, you've not done this before, but I want you to do this, and as they do it, it creates a good context like that, it's easy for them to keep going. But on the other side of the equation, and what makes it hard for some people to get out of that comfort zone, is when it's kind of a negative emotion. Maybe it brings up fear, or it brings up loneliness or isolation, those kind of feelings. The physiological response that we have to that, it's not very comfortable. It's something that we don't like to do. And the neurology of our brain makes us want to back away from that. And that's where people get stuck in their comfort zone. And I think the fact that the term became comfort zone out of all of that is absolutely really brilliant in some ways, because it's a versus comfortable feeling inside us versus an uncomfortable feeling. And how you get past that, if it's something you've chosen to do and it's a worthwhile cause that you're doing, that you're going after, then when you have that feeling, you learn to separate, okay, the logic of what's going on with that feeling that keeps them out of their comforts or makes them uncomfortable, many times is linked to activities that have happened way earlier in their life. It's our childhood, it's other experiences that we've had. So when we get that and we want to back away, we just realize, okay, that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is I'm about to go in and make a sales call, or I'm about to call someone about listing their home. And it's logical. They need this. So this feeling that I have, that's about something else, because I haven't even talked to this person yet. And I always tell people sales call reluctance is actually an imaginary, it is a physiological response to an imagined event. The event hasn't even happened yet, but your body's reacting like it's already happened. And so when you learn to separate that, then you can move out of your comfort zone. So if you'll set goals themselves tend to motivate most people. You set the goal, you set the activity level, and then you focus on going to do each activity level. And every time that little feeling happens where it's not in your comfort zone, you just remind yourself, that has nothing to do with what I'm about to try, because I've never even met this person. They may be the nicest person I've ever worked with in my life. This might be the biggest sale I've ever made in my life. So you can't, that's the easiest answer for me. That's how I get out of my comfort zone. That's how I conquer it when I have that feeling and I need to get out of my comfort zone. So.
Thank you. And I like what you said earlier about actually that one more call when you're doing the activity as well. But again, we get rejected a lot when we make these calls.
Sure.
So how do you deal with, well, I call it not yet. A lot of people will call it no. So, how does a good salesperson overcome rejection?
I'll tell you exactly how I did it. I read a book. As a matter of fact, it was my first book on sales that I had ever read in my life. It was given to me by one of my life mentors, a gentleman named Jack Amberson, who lives in the state of Alabama. And he gave me a book, and it was written by a gentleman named Frank Bettger. It's spelled Betger, but the name is pronounced Bettger. And it's an old book now. The terminology is wrong. Everything, well, not wrong, but outdated, I guess. But in that book, it's called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. And one of the things that book taught and that I understood, which is what helped me become successful actually in the uniform industry as well, was how to calculate the calls you need. And it was basically, not going through an entire exercise here, but you calculate, if you keep up with your calls, so you know how many people you had to contact to have someone say, yes, I'll listen to what you have to say. And then how many people who listen to what you have to say, you have to go through that process to get them to say, yes, I'll do this with you. Thank you. And then you calculate your income from that, from the sale that you made. If you'll track your averages a little bit, you'll begin to see a pattern. And in my case, in the industrial uniform industry, I remember it exactly. I knew based on the number of calls that I would have to make to get an employer presentation or a presentation to the owner of the company, and how many of those presentations I needed to make in order to get a sale and what my average commission was. I knew that I made $23 when I divided that average commission out by the number of calls it took to get there. I knew that I made $23 every time I walked in the door. Whether they said yes, whether they said no, it didn't matter, because I began to look at it as I wasn't paid to, it didn't matter if they said yes or no. I wasn't paid to do that. I was paid to make enough activity happen so that I found where the yes was in the first place, because the yes was already waiting on me. I just hadn't found it yet. And so what I would do mentally, if they said yes, I would say, great, thank you for the $23. So I didn't get super excited. Oh, yes, someone's going to just let me talk to them. I didn't do that. If they said no, I didn't get really down, because I still made $23 per call. And I'll never forget one time I was in the Atlanta, Georgia market. And we're talking 30 years ago now. So when I was in the insurance industry, the amount of income per call was a lot higher. But when I walked into a place one Monday morning, it was so funny. And I had no longer gotten my name and my company name and my card like this to the receptionist. And the owner was standing behind the receptionist. And this, again, was the industrial uniform industry. And it has kind of a sordid past if you want to look at it that way. And he began to go off on me. He began to swear. He began to say all kinds of things. And he said, I don't know anything about your company. I don't know you, but the laundry industry it's controlled by the mafia. I mean, he went off on me and was using a lot of words that I won't say in front of your audience. And I looked at him and I began to smile. And he stopped in mid-sentence. I guess I was doing like I'm doing now because I'm smiling now. But he stopped mid-sentence and he said, boy, how can you be smiling after the chewing I just gave you? And I started laughing. I said, well, I said, my boss told me that I needed to run into at least one of you a week or I wasn't working hard enough. And he started laughing. I said, look, actually, I just made $23 whether you said yes or no. He said, what do you mean you just made $23 whether I said yes or no? And I explained the concept to him. And he said, I need to have you come in and talk to my salespeople. And I started laughing. And I said, for a fee? And I didn't know 30 years later, that's exactly what I would do for a living, is talk to salespeople.
Fantastic. Look, you mentioned about value proposition. Mm-hmm. So, how do people go out and demonstrate their value? How can people add value, especially, well, actually, it should be for me. I see too many estate agents in the UK see it as a one-off transaction, whereas for me, it's all about being relationship building and building that client for life and giving that value proposition so that they want to recommend me to their friends, their family, their colleagues, their neighbours. But how do people get to understand what their value proposition is?
The easiest way is to keep asking one question. And then once you have an answer, ask it again to try to go deeper. And that is, how is my prospect or how is my customer's life going to be better if they do business with me? What's going to improve in their life? Your audience is primary in real estate. How are the people going how is their life going to be better? If you help them find that home, they raise their family, they have their world, and that home becomes a center of that. And when you help them find that right place, you're improving their whole world. And so in your prospecting efforts and in your business efforts, you focus on that. And then when you feel like you have that value proposition really well, then just ask yourself one more question. Well, what does that really mean to them? And just keep going deeper. And what you'll do is you'll start to discover, hey, I've changed these people's lives. When I can help them find the right place, their life gets better. And I was a part of that process. Like when I was in the insurance industry, I actually told people, I said, you think about what we do. The company that I worked with was a company that basically these were supplemental policies on top of their regular insurance. And so when they had situations going on, our company wasn't paying the doctor or the hospital. Our company was giving money to the policyholder. So it was money they could use to fund their life while they couldn't work, while they were sick or hurt, et cetera. And I said, you get paid to make people still be able to make their house payments. You help them in doing that. You connect them with Aflac, and then you're standing in the middle and you get compensated for that. And so that was kind of how I kept approaching it at a higher level. And you hit something extremely important with your comment a second ago. You were talking about how you didn't look at it as a one-off transaction. That is the way, regardless of industry. Well, I take it back. There's one industry that this may not work, and that's if you're selling burial plots. Okay, one-offs may be all you get on that one. But anything else, real estate, insurance, seminars, books, whatever, look at it as I want this relationship for life. I want to be the first person who not only is top of mind, but also as Grant Mueller, a friend of mine, says, I want to be top of heart. I want to be the first person they think of. I want them to like me. I want them to know me. I want them to trust me. And then I want to keep in contact with them so that if they ever need anything in that arena, I am the first person they think of. I call that creating a fusion point. And there's a way structurally that I teach to do that I don't know that we'll have time to go through today. But it's important to understand the point you just made is one of the biggest things your audience needs to take away from this. They need to understand this. I'm not going for a one-off. I'm going to keep that relationship going with that person for their entire life. I don't want to be, in the United States, we call it a realtor. I think you said a state agent there. I don't want to be that one time. I want to be the only one they have for the rest of their life. And then you keep that relationship going, because the relationship itself, their value they get above and beyond the transaction is that constant value from you, that you're doing things that are helpful to them. It may be that you're sending them something that they need article-wise, but that just has to do with home ownership in general, or anything that you can help them with. One of the things I did that I learned from Bob Berg and Endless Referrals was the process that he teaches in that book about networking is quit trying to give out your card, do your elevator speech, try to find out how you can connect different people. And he would focus on connecting different people in the group with each other. And then he became known as that connector, and he began to get a lot of referrals back because of it. I took that process and I embedded it into my insurance career when I was still out in the field making calls and doing all of that. And I remember the first time I did it, I had an appointment set up with the owner of a company. It was in Dallas, Texas. It was a mortgage company. And he had been my account for a while. And I went in to visit with him. I told him, I said, I called ahead of time and said, I need to get about 20 minutes with you if that's okay. And he said, sure. So when I got into his office, Stephen, I sat down in front of him at his desk. And I said, look, I want to thank you. He said, why? And I said, well, I make my living by doing what I do. And you're one of my clients. Your employees are participating in what I do. You're actually helping me feed my family. You're not just doing some business with an insurance company. You're helping me personally, and I want to thank you for that. And I said, I'd like to go one step further. I'd like to return that favor. So, and I said, I meet a lot of people out there when I'm making sales calls, and I have a lot of clients. What's the one question, or give me a couple of questions that I need to be asking them to know if they're a good prospect for me to send to you? And I just stopped talking. And he took off his glasses. I'll always remember this. He took off his glasses and he said, got to tell you something before I answer your question. I said, what? And he said, thank you. And I said, well, you're welcome, but what are you talking about? He said, I've been in business 30 years. I've had salespeople ask me for referrals all the time. You're the first person ever that's in sales who's ever come and asked me how you could refer business to me. Thank you. And it was a huge bonding moment, a huge fusion point. And then he told me a couple of things. I literally picked up my phone while I was there sitting in front of him. And I said, hang on just a second. And I called somebody. And it was somebody that I'd already had a couple of my clients that I thought would be good referrals to send his way. So I called one of them and I said, hey, I've got another client. He's in the mortgage industry. He's been doing it a long time. He's doing something a little bit unique right now. I know him, I like him, and I trust him, and I would like to connect you two. Would that be okay? And the guy said, sure. So then when I hung up, I gave him the contact information. So I actually proactively gave him a referral while we sat there. And so he and I began to refer business back and forth. We began to put a little network together. So that's a value that cost me nothing. And I provided it above and beyond the transaction. And it turns out, as Bob teaches in Endless Referrals and in the Go-Giver book, it brought extra value to the table for him, but it also paid off for me because the way I got compensated from the referrals that I earned there are huge. And so it's a mindset, always going in some way, some form or fashion to provide value above that transaction and keep that relationship going for life.
Brilliant. There is absolute gold there. So thank you so much for sharing it.
My pleasure.
I'm really conscious of time, and I do want to speak about your books. So I don't know how much longer we've got.
Okay.
But Said the Lady with the Blue Hair. It's a story of Kay, a young widow, trying to figure out how she's going to go forward with her daughter after their devastating loss. And she meets a lady with blue hair called Belle. And Belle gives her, I think it's 7 life lessons, 7 successes.
Right.
So obviously we want to keep something back. But one of them was about being naughty, I think.
I wish I said it I wish I had the same accent as you when I say that, because I love that.
So I don't know how much you want to share, but obviously there's 7 successes. Please, share about a couple of the lessons about the book that will help people.
I'll be glad to. And I get tickled. My co-author on Said the Lady with the Blue Hair. First, let me back up. My first book was The Unexpected Tour Guide, and it won an award. I got to go to New York City for the recognition and that kind of thing. So that was nice. Sold a lot of copies. But my second book, I actually co-authored with a lady named Lisa Wilbur. And Lisa is Avon, not cosmetics, they do all kinds of things, but she is Avon's 5th highest earner in history. She has about 5,000 people on her sales team. I refer to her as a direct sales legend when I talk about her. But she actually, when we first met, was on a Go-Giver Success Alliance Zoom call with Bob Berg, and she had blue hair as we were in the meeting. And she was I don't remember the reason she had dyed it blue at the first place, but she felt a little intimidated. So when it was her time to talk on the Zoom call, she started telling her stories about it. If you want to be less judgmental in your life, dye your hair blue. And she said, this is working for me. I can be in a grocery store and I can see a lady whose skirt's a little too tight. And I can think, wow, that lady's skirt's too tight, said the lady with the blue hair. And I thought it was hilarious. So that day I sent her a little message in the chat. And I said, that would make a great book title. Well, we never approached doing that. I changed my business model about a year later to where I was looking for co-authorships, kind of like what Bob Berg and John David Mann did with the Go-Giver. So Lisa and I connected on that. And so the 7 rules for success are things that this woman has been teaching her sales team for 30, 40 years. That's one of the reasons she is so huge at what she does, and they're strong lessons. So the story is wonderful. I write business fables, business parables. Both The Unexpected Tour Guide and Said the Lady with the Blue Hair are stories that are strong enough that your audience will love reading them just because they're good stories, but then we teach things and we sneak things into them. But 2 of my rules that I would say of the 7 rules of success that we put in the book, I'm going to stick with the ones that I think are the funniest today. There are some great books, and every entrepreneur will do well to read these books and learn the information. Doesn't matter what branch of sales or entrepreneurship you're in. But Lisa's favorite rule in the book is the naughty rule, or as you say, the naughty rule. I love that, gosh. But the naughty rule basically says, if you don't get in trouble every now and then, you're probably not trying hard enough. And it was about innovation, and it was about trying to do things, take what's there, learn from it, have the right mindset about what you've already learned, but don't be afraid to step out of the comfort zone of what you're already good at to get better and to innovate, to come up with new things that you can do, new ways to create value. And if that gets you in trouble a little bit, sometimes in a direct sales fashion, then okay, then apologize and move forward. But so that was her favorite rule. And it so describes Lisa. She's kind of known for doing that. And that's one of the reasons her organization is so large. And I don't know whether I should tell my favorite rule or not. Let me ask you a question. Is your audience ready for something if it's just slightly off balance?
Why not? Anything that can help and add value and make a difference. It's good to be different.
Well, there's a rule in the book called the miniskirt rule. And the rule is addressing those salespeople basically who talk too much. They go on too much about their product or their service, or they talk too much and the client's already not, or potential client is not with them anymore. They've lost them, but they keep on going and they take forever. And she was trying to get her group to understand that sometimes you go on you talk too much. And so the miniskirt rule is this: when it comes to your sales presentations, keep them like your miniskirt. Make them short enough to hold people's attention, but long enough to cover the goods. When she told me that, how we actually designed the book, I told her to make a list of everything that she teaches her people that we could turn into a principle. And we narrowed it down to 7. And when she told me that one, Stephen, I think I laughed for 10 minutes. I couldn't stop laughing. I couldn't go. And if that offended any of your audience, I so apologize. But it's dealt with at a very G-level manner in the book. And there's one little scene in there too where our main character Kai gets a guy on her sales team, and she's shaking her head, going, "How am I going to teach him the miniskirt rule?"
Very good. Very good. A couple of other questions, if you don't mind, and then
Sure.
I will leave you to have a lovely, productive, successful day in Texas. So Belle was obviously a mentor. Importance of having a mentor and having a coach.
Oh, I cannot stress that enough. One of the things that I did, and I don't know where I learned this, but I actually invested a lot in my career over the decades. And I quit counting when I had invested well over $50,000, but I've been doing this a long time. So it's not like someone needs to invest that much in 1 year, I would suppose. But the difference a mentor, coach will make in someone's life is pretty significant. And in my case, I say I've been blessed with good mentors, actually. The first was a gentleman I think I mentioned earlier, and it may have been while we were behind scenes. I don't remember. There's a gentleman named Jack Amberson. And Jack was my first sales manager in the musical instrument industry. And the lesson that I learned from that particular mentor, I learned sales lessons from him, but the lesson I learned the most was how to be a dad. Because when I interviewed for the sales position with his company, he said, "Come spend a week with me." I was actually getting my master's degree at the time. And in the States, we have something called spring break, where you get a week off. Everybody goes on holiday pretty much at the same time. And so I went to visit with him for the week that I was on spring break. And I actually rode with him the entire week. I stayed at his home. I ate with his family. And he did the job. And I just rode along with him, watching him do it to see if I thought I would like to do it. And every morning, Stephen, at whatever time we were getting up, which was early, we'd be around his breakfast table drinking coffee. And he had 2 young children. And Ted, I think, was in the 1st grade, and his daughter Becky was a little bit younger. Every single morning, those kids would run and jump up in his lap. And he would give them a hug, and he'd give them a kiss. And he said 2 things that I had never heard. And this is not a dig against my parents, but I'd never heard this. He said, "I love you so much. I am so proud that God picked me to be your daddy." Stephen, it changed my world. I grew up in a family that didn't express that. And I know my parents loved me. They worked, they put food on the table, they did what they needed to do, but I'd never heard that. And that one event changed the way I raised my children. And it's so funny. I actually got permission from Jack to use his character and actually his name in The Unexpected Tour Guide. And I write about the man. He's that good of a person. And I raised my children with them understanding that from the beginning and hearing it from their dad from the beginning. And now my children are grown. And my daughters are 39 and 35, and I have grandchildren. And Stephen, I've watched them do the same thing with their children. So Jack didn't just change my life and my children's life. He changed my grandchildren's life. I got an email from a lady in, I think it was Australia, not too long ago. And she had just read The Unexpected Tour Guide. And actually, she got the audiobook and she loved it. And she had sent me a message about it. And then like 2 days later, I saw her make a post about her parents. And she used the exact same verbiage. She said, I am so glad that God picked you two to be my parents. And so I sent Jack a message about that. I said, buddy, you didn't just change my life. You're changing lives everywhere now. And so that was one mentor. I had a sales mentor who was absolutely fantastic. The one who gave me the 2 books, he was that I mentioned earlier. It was funny when he gave me those 2 books. I'm a little bit of a rebel. I'll be honest, Stephen. I tend to be outspoken at times to my detriment. But he gave me those 2 books. He says, I want you to read these 2 books. And I said, Frank Davies, I'm a grown man. I'll decide if I read those books, and I'm reading those books. but he was a great sales mentor in the insurance industry. And then Bob Berg. Actually, Bob Berg and John David Mann, but Bob Berg is a huge mentor to me. His mentality about what he does is exactly like the books he writes. That's not always the case with authors in our industry. He teaches providing value above and beyond the transaction. He teaches being focused on your client. And when he does that, it's also the way he lives. And that's knowing him behind the scenes and knowing these things. He's a huge mentor to me. And John David Mann, we were talking about having mentors. I actually John is my friend, and he just opened up a sales course, and it's called Writing Mastery Mentorship. I was the first person to sign up for it because granted, if I'm going to do business with someone, I like doing business with a friend, that's great, but he's that good of a mentor to me. So I'm still spending money and getting coached and doing the things that I need to do to become better, because every time I do that, my income goes up because I apply what I learn. If you're not going to apply the lessons, don't waste your time. But if you're applying the lessons, your income's probably going to improve. So the return on investment is huge. By the way, I mentioned the girl who got the Audible version of The Unexpected Tour Guide. If you go to Audible, I guess you have Audible in the UK, and get The Unexpected Tour Guide, there's a coupon in there that I put in, and it's kind of a audio commercial basically, but I give you access to a course that I've been selling for years at $97, and I give it to people for free. So that's kind of my value add, my trying to do something above and beyond the transaction. And most people, when they go on Audible, they can actually get the book. If they're new, they get it for free. They just sign up and they get the first 2 books free anyway. So it's great. So
Brilliant.
Hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you. I'm incredibly grateful for your time this afternoon. So thank you. How do people find you, Jeff?
The easiest way is to go to jeffcwest.com, jeffcwest.com. There you can find information about the books. You can find information about me. There's also, you can go to Fusion Points, points being plural, fusionpoints.com if you're looking for someone to work with your sales team and help create basically the environment where your customers and your salespeople always want to take the next step with you. And then I have one other thing that I do, and it's where I'm co-authoring books. I now have people that will reach out to me to co-author a book with them. And so you can find information on that, coauthoryourmessage.com, or you just go to jeffcwest.com and you can find everything. How's that?
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for your time today. I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening, whether it's live or on replay. I'm incredibly grateful, and I wish you all a successful and productive day. So thank you very much. Jeff, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. I'm honored.